someone needs to have security to access the services that are provided by SACCOs. But in most cases, women don't have the required security. And that means that they end up not benefiting from the services provided by SACCOs. And on top of that, I have seen women that have accessed credit from SACCOs and failed to pay back. And the end result, their businesses have been confiscated by the proprietors of SACCO, because SACCOs are profit-making businesses. And if you fail to pay, there is no way they can forgive you. So women have lost even the initial capital they had because of failure to do what? To pay back. You remember, they are given credit with high interest rates, and at the end of the day they fail to pay back. Then lastly, I want to talk about can I call it gender-based violence in homes, which has mainly affected women. And recently I was so disappointed when I saw that government was not doing enough to support and the domestic, the marriage and divorce bill. Because to me, I thought it was maybe it would help to reduce on the gender-based violence, because it is women who are mostly affected in this case. Where I come from, you find women being denied their inheritance rights. This is a person who started with a man when they had nothing, and when a man dies, the woman is thrown out of the house with totally nothing. So I feel something needs to be done as far as gender-based violence is concerned, because it is affecting women more. So government should look at such initiatives that can help to at least address such injustices, because they deprive women of their rights. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Right. We started out with Lady's voice, and she particularly points out actually maternal deaths have not reduced as anticipated. At the last count, the statistics indicated 14 mothers would die a day. That is the equivalent of a matatu, if you do a matatu in this country. So imagine if you did a matatu accident, would do a front page story every day in a newspaper. The numbers have increased by 2. So we are at 16 mothers that die a day. So you would have a matatu plus a boda on the front page of every newspaper indicated as fatal accidents a day. Patrick, the teacher's voice.
Thank you very much, Peter. The Honorable Minister, protocol observed. I will first make a correction. Yes. I use the other. Thank you. No teacher follow instructions, so I was waiting for the instruction. Allow me to observe protocol, but also make one correction. That I work for the Coalition of Uganda Private School Teachers Association. While we acknowledge that the Ministry of Education has the highest top organ that brings all together stakeholders, the Education Sector Consultative Committee, where I sit as a member, the highest person at the Uganda National Teachers Union also sits there. I also sit at the Education Annual Sector Review, and so is the Teachers Union. So the comments I will give are for the both public and private sector. And for that matter, I do qualify to offer the assessment. We acknowledge, first of all, that teachers offered what they thought and what they still think is the way to go in terms of what they want to realize, to be aligned with the NRM manifesto. We also know that Chapter 4 of the NRM manifesto highlights issues of human development, or call it HR. And to do with education, it captures wrongly the pupil-teacher ratio and the pupil-classroom ratio. I request you to subject my discussion and focus your eyes to the classroom in the districts where you come from. That as we speak now, there are over 100 or 90 pupils in one classroom with one teacher. We are not talking about schools in the areas where this auditorium is. So in view of that, the NRM manifesto captures the pupil-teacher ratio at 61.5. But truth be told, there are too many pupils packed in classrooms. So to us, when we presented our issues in the manifesto, we had 5 to 6 issues. The first was improved welfare in terms of remuneration. We had improved conditions of service in terms of how the teacher works. We had an issue of improving the infrastructure. We also had an issue of interesting the teacher to teach efficiently. Well, the manifesto of the government, the NRM government, highlights that 6 to 8% of its budget will be allocated to instructional materials, or call them learning aids. It is well captured. It does not reflect what is on the ground, because just in last month I was part of the team that was assessing the sector performance generally. I should say we are not yet where we want to go. We also know very well that the first infrastructure development in a classroom setting should be the blackboard. During my visits, I have come across blackboards that have turned from black to either gray or white. And that's the first tool of instruction. Teachers find it hard to write content in gullies. I should equate the blackboards to the potholes in some roads. That should be seriously looked at, because content is got from the blackboard. Allow me also talk about the teachers' welfare. In the NRM manifesto, the government commits itself to observing the Education Act. My thinking is that with the wave of private schools now in Uganda, the Education Act should address the prevailing situations. Suffice to say, much as the government commits to addressing the Act, there are still dysfunctional school management committees, board of governors, the structures are not working very well, and private schools are not giving teachers contracts. So in view of that, would like the government to realize that the Act has not yet been respected, and this is the reason that both parents, teachers, communities, also the pupils should join this discussion and make sure that the government is 100% under check. I want to thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick. I'm looking at figures that are interesting. The commitment of government over the period has been to increase teachers' salaries by 50% within 3 years. According to the report that shall be launched, 15% of that was achieved. The other has not been achieved. One of the statistics that I find very interesting is the numeracy and literacy statistic. For primary 3 pupils surveyed by the Ministry of Education, only 9.7% of them had the literacy skills as desired by the Ministry of Education or out of the public schools. At P6 level, only 9.9% of the surveyed children had the desired literacy and numeracy skills at the public schools. That is Ministry of Education statistic. That is the education sector. Of course, one of those very good things that I see captured from the Ministry of Education statistics is that science teachers received an enhancement of up to 30% of their wages. The last time they were on strike, they didn't mention this to us. Right, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I will ask Justice Mayambala from the youth, representing the youth, to take the microphone. The youth has been an interesting group. There have been promises of improving youth unemployment, job creation. There's been all monies put in that sector. Have those monies impacted on you as the youth?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Justice Mayambala. Since I'm one of the youth leaders in Uganda, I'm going to talk about the issue that affects young people in Uganda the most. That is unemployment. Whenever I talk about unemployment, my heart stops beating. My eyes start crying. And I feel very much ashamed. I'm one of the youth in Uganda who championed the idea of the youth fund. I led the group that went to the Parliament of Uganda and demanded them to establish the youth fund. The idea was very beautiful. We wanted the government to allocate a certain amount of money to young people in Uganda to be able to create their own jobs. It's not a new idea. And whenever we talk about the youth fund, we are not talking about giving young people free money. The money had to be paid back by the youth. The money was passed by the Parliament of Uganda, but up to right now, we don't know where the money has gone. The money disappeared. That's what makes me feel like crying. You have 80% of young people in Uganda who are unemployed. 80%. And yet the government of Uganda is deliberately ignoring these people. When you look at United States of America, every year, Obama has to announce a certain number of jobs that have been created. But in Uganda, President Museveni, every time he makes speeches, he criticizes the unemployed for being drunk. But he doesn't recognize one thing, that it is the government that is responsible to create the jobs for the people in Uganda. If the government deliberately ignores the issue of unemployment, you're going to see young people in Uganda rising up, like it is the case in Egypt, in Iraq, in Syria, where young people have risen up and overthrown the government. So the government, Mr. Museveni and the NRM should be very aware and cautious of young people and what we are capable of doing in Uganda. I heard the argument of one of the previous speakers talking about the issue of education. It is through education that people get to have the skills that they use in their employment, or even to look for jobs, or even create jobs themselves. But the education in Uganda, the education system in Uganda is a typical sellout. In classes, we spend more time being taught about things that are not concerning us, things like Central and Seaway, Canadian Prairies, yet things that are going to help us as Ugandans are not being articulated. So those are the two most critical issues that affect young people in Uganda today. And if the government does not stand up as soon as possible to address these issues, we young people are not going to sit down. We are going to rise up. we are going to overpower the government, and we shall bring in a government of the people, for the people, by the people, that will be able to listen to the youth.